Howdy folks, Joe Howard here. Just a quick reminder before we start the show today that as usual, our guests are going to be doing an AMA in the WP MRR community. So if you've listened to today's episode with Iain and Alex and you're like, man, I got to ask those two a question, either about selling businesses or buying businesses or about the WordPress ecosystem and what the, acquisition space looks like right now and how it's changed over the last 18 months, et cetera, you can ask them directly. And so check out community.wpmrr.com. Just head into the AMA space. And when this episode goes live, they should have the post up for the AMA. So you can go in there and ask them anything. WP MRR Virtual Summit coming up September 21st through 23rd. If you've listened to the past, 6, 7, 8 episodes, you hear me talk about this every week. So I wanted to change things up a little bit this week. And instead of talk about this year's summit, I actually want to give you a resource from last year's summit, the 2020 Virtual Summit. It's kind of related to this podcast episode. This is more relevant to folks who are thinking about selling their business. If that's you run a WordPress business and you're thinking maybe now, but maybe in the future, maybe a long time in the future, you want to think about selling it. You want to make sure you have things in order. You want to make sure your data is set up, your analytics are good, your financials are rocking. So I wanted to give the resource of a talk from last year on our YouTube channel. That talk is titled The 80-20 of Profits, Pricing and Margins in Subscriptions. It's a talk by Ben McAdam, who is our CFO at WP Buff. So I know for sure that he knows his stuff. So we'll include a link to that in the show notes and in the description in the YouTube video, so you can go ahead and click through and watch that. Cool. That is all for pre-show announcements. So let's talk a little bit about today's episode. I was lucky enough to have Iain Poulson and Alex Denning on the podcast this week. Alex been on a few times. Iain, this is his first time on. They do a few different things in the WordPress space. You'll hear all about that, in 1-2 minutes when they talk about the stuff they do in WordPress. But I really wanted to have them on because they recently launched FlipWP, and that is really focused on the space of buying and selling WordPress businesses and everything going on in the acquisition space, the hot acquisition space, especially over the past year, 18 months or so. We got to talk about what that space looks like in general. We got to talk about things from the perspective of buyers, from the perspective of sellers, and what they think about what the future of this space looks like, as well as just a little background about how they decided to, how they met in the first place, when and how they decided that they needed to build FlipWP and make it a real business. A little bit of talk about their pricing structure and why they've done it the way they have. And yeah, really cool to talk to these guys. I've been friends with Alex for a while, and Iain I've gotten to know a little bit more over the past 6 months or so, but also a good friend of mine. So cool to have them on the podcast in addition to just having them as part of my personal community. So hope you enjoy. Please welcome both Iain Poulson and Alex Denning to the podcast. Enjoy today's episode. All right, guys, we are live. I've got Iain Poulson and Alex Denning on the podcast this week. Why don't you each take 15, 20, 30 seconds. Just tell folks a little bit about what you do in the WordPress space. Alex, you've been on before, so I'm going to have Iain go first, then Alex, you'll follow up. So Iain, go for it.
Oh, I was expecting it the other way around. Yeah. Hey, Joe, thanks for having us on. So I'm product manager for Delicious Brains, sort of by day, which is my main gig, I guess. Delicious Brains make WordPress plugins. They are like the developer plugin company. And I'm the product manager, sort of overseeing the main plugins, which is most recently added to with advanced custom fields. So that's kind of crazy, kind of busy. But I have a number of side gigs, side projects that I have. I run a couple of WordPress plugins and a couple of things that have come out and been sold recently. I ran Plugin Rank last year and into this year, and then it got acquired. Started a WordPress business trends sort of newsletter called WP Trends. And yeah, kind of a new thing that me and Alex have been working on, hence I guess coming on. So yeah, lots of things and not enough hours in the day.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? Cool. Thanks, Iain. Alex, your turn.
My day job is I run a marketing agency called Ellipsis. We are a specialized marketing agency for WordPress businesses. My job is to be managing director, and that's what I spend most of my time on. Get to solve interesting problems around WordPress, and pretty close to what's happening and emerging in WordPress WooCommerce spaces, which is very fun. For the last nearly 5 years, I've co-authored Master WP, which is a weekly newsletter for WordPress professionals. It's been a lot of fun as well. And then I like solving problems. And Iain and I figured we had a problem that people didn't know how to sell their WordPress businesses. So we've made FlipWP a couple of months ago. That's been a fun ride so far.
Yeah, and that's obviously there's so much that both you just said that we could talk about, right? I'd love to talk more about Master WP. I'd love to talk more about Delicious Brains, about ACF. Like there's so much there, but we're gonna try and stay on FlipWP-ish, just because this is the new thing you two are doing. As the WordPress ecosystem continues to mature, more money comes into it. There's been a lot of buying and selling over the past 5 years, but it's even accelerated even more over this kind of pandemic time, last 18 months or so. I mean, I've seen so much. And so FlipWP is like, that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. So the first thing I wanted to ask you two, which I actually don't even know the answer to, is how do you two know each other, and how did you two meet? Have you hung out in real life and had the chance to do that? Are you older friends, or are you kind of newer friends who have only been friends via video screen? What was that process of actually initially becoming friends and actually thinking like, hey, FlipWP, we should do this thing?
Yeah. We've been relatively new friends, I think, in terms of the WordPress space. We had Alex on. I do another podcast with Jack McConnell called Pressing Matters, which is kind of WordPress development, WordPress business, basically just me and Jack having a chat. But when we first launched, I think 2018 or 2019, we had more guests on the podcast, and we had Alex on to talk about plugin marketing, and we were basically just trying to feed knowledge from our guests, and we both run plugins, so we thought Alex would be a really good person to talk to. And around that time, I acquired a plugin. I acquired one of my main plugins, which is WP User Manager. And I didn't really kind of know the plugin, as in I didn't know the space. It was in contrast to the plugin that one of my other plugins that I run, which, I had the problem, I developed it. It was something that I really knew a lot about. So I thought, God, I don't actually know the best way to market this. And Alex had come on the podcast and obviously marketed himself very well with Ellipsis and what he can do for plugin developers and product companies. And so I kind of initiated him to help me with a content audit and strategy and how to grow User Manager. And we got on, and it was, kind of a successful relationship from that point of view. But I think when I started Plugin Rank, he was the person I spoke to before it even launched to say, this is what I'm doing. This might actually be good for your clients because you're, managing their marketing. SEO in Google is a channel, but obviously WordPress.org is a channel. So maybe this could, he could be my biggest enterprise client or enterprise customer. And the more we got chatting about it, the more we got talking about the WordPress plugin space, the ecosystem, people buying plugins and people using Plugin Rank to try and, get information about plugins and all of this stuff. It just led to talking more and more. We did meet at WordCamp Berlin or WordCamp Europe in Berlin for the first time, but that was like before we kind of really got serious. We got serious when we met. When we got serious, and it's kind of culminated in launching a business together.
Okay, so relatively new friends. Yeah. So you met once. You met at WordCamp Europe. I guess that was like 2019. 2019. Was that when it was in
2019.
Berlin? 2019. Yeah. I was there too. This is funny. It's like I probably passed you two talking or something, and it was like but now I get the chance to talk about it. So cool. Met in real life, I guess, like once, and now have done everything else remotely in terms of FlipWP. So and for people who are like, what's FlipWP, flipwp.co. Alex, why don't you give folks a little bit of background into the what is FlipWP, and then like why now? Like why did you decide that this was a problem that needed to be solved as of a couple months ago when it launched?
So Flip's a marketplace for buying and selling WordPress businesses. It's a private marketplace, so only members can see the listings, and people can list their businesses, typically WordPress product businesses. They get distributed to our members, who are the possible buyers, and we're a platform. We then leave it to people to take it from there as they want to. On the buyer side, we have memberships which are paid, so that somewhat qualifies people as serious buyers. And on the seller side, we take a 1% success fee if people sell. So pretty straightforward model. As you said up top, there is more merger and acquisition activity in WordPress. Those sales were happening off of random tweets, random Slack messages for like life-changing decisions.
Totally.
Which didn't
Slack
seem
DMs,
ideal.
People were just like, "Hey, you want to sell me your thing?"
Right.
Sure, let's talk.
And
Private messages. Yeah.
and like big sales were being done that way, and that we thought that didn't seem ideal. It's difficult for buyers to know what's for sale. Sellers need, like, you've got to hope that the right people are online when you post in the post status Slack. Like that's probably not the best system. So through having plugin rank, Iain started doing WP trends, where it was looking at interesting analysis from movements in plugins on WordPress.org. So Iain had basically a copy of the plugin repository data and could query it for insight. That newsletter was super interesting, and that meant, and then it was also covering plugins that were for sale on MicroAcquire typically. So from that, we had the buyer side sorted. For Ellipsis, I was having more and more clients interested in selling, and we were just getting asked more and more about, like, if we want to sell in the next 18 months, what should we be doing now? I want to sell in the next 18 days. Help! Like these were conversations just having more and more.
Yeah.
Iain and I started connecting people occasionally, and I think it's, you have product market fit because it hits you in the face. And we didn't even have a product, and we were being hit in the face with demand. So it seemed like
just based on tweets and private stuff. Yeah, like
very low tech stuff. But it was very, very obvious that the demand was there. So yeah, eventually we pulled the trigger on it.
Yeah. Do you think that this has been accelerated by the past 18 months of pandemic and economy and maybe WordPress economy? I guess that's not a super specific question. I guess my slightly more specific and easier to answer question is, do you think this is more just that there's more money coming into the WordPress space, it's maturing, that it's WordPress space is just at this, as when most ecosystems mature, there's more coming together, because it's just, at some point, I guess that's, I don't know how capitalism works or how the world economy works. The other side of things is just like, is this potentially due to the past 18 months of COVID has the past 18 months been harder for more people on average to run their business, either from a financial standpoint or from like a mental health, like I'm just kind of like done with this right now just because I'm not feeling so hot right now. Maybe it's a good time to sell. Maybe it's a combination of both. I don't know if either of you two have like background. I mean, you've talked to a lot of sellers, so maybe you have a little bit of background on this. And of course, I don't need any specifics on terms of specific buyers, but in general, what's the vibe like in terms of the large number of acquisitions we've seen in the past 18 months or so?
I think from a seller perspective, it's definitely a combination of the WordPress maturity of the ecosystem. You're getting some sellers who have been around for years, like Advanced Custom Fields. Elliot was building ACF for 10 years. And you get to a point where, are you going to be doing it for another 10 years, or is it the right time to sell? And, people who have they've gone quite far with it and they decide that maybe it's the right time. And so it's not necessarily, I don't think the pandemic as such, maybe that has taken its toll on mental health, but generally I think most plugins have done well over the time that a lot of people were online during the pandemic and going to online communities rather than doing real world stuff. But yeah, I think buyers now just view the WordPress ecosystem as really tasty. And there seems to be a lot of money from hosts and other big companies that just think this is, there's a place we can expand, and it's plugins.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of categories of people on the buyer and seller side. And I think what we've seen, especially in the last 6 months, is a happy mixing of a number of unconnected forces, which have made now a hot time to sell, and also means that like we are doing this now. You've got people. It used to be the case like 10 years ago in WordPress, you just had to exist. This is mostly true. You just had to like be there, and you would be successful. Like you would build whatever sort of business. And some of what we're seeing is like those just maxing out. But I don't think that alone that's a necessary but not sufficient reason to sell if you're in that position. I think the reason to sell has probably been driven by big headline acquisitions, predominantly from hosts. And that's come from capital being cheap at scale at the moment. And I think that's that plus like whatever other factors. WordPress in general grew a lot last year, boosted people's numbers. That maybe plus, I don't know, they want to go to the beach. Who knows? It's just a happy mixing of those things. I think we did have a fairly quiet period for M&A through the first half of last year, but things started picking up, and then things started picking up some more, and then we had these big headline acquisitions, and suddenly there's FOMO, which is driving acquisitions across all parts of the market. I think that puts we could buy something on the mind of like Joe Howard at WP Buffs, and also on the mind of Liquid Web, and also on the mind of whoever. It's plus people from completely outside WordPress. That last category we haven't really seen that fully emerge yet. So that is going to be an interesting thing to look out for, especially if we have any IPOs this year. I think we would see more of that. I think it's starting to see a little bit of it, of like people who know nothing about WordPress and are just seeing opportunity. And it's just this magic convergence of all of these things happening all at the same time. There's really, like, I would describe the market as hot right now. And
yeah, I vibe with what you two are saying about the last year being maybe not surprisingly, but fortunately, very good for a lot of WordPress companies. Not just the big ones, the hosts, but a lot of the smaller ones as well. I mean, like we had a great year last year. Thank goodness, but still the fact remains like a lot of WordPress companies did well in the past year, which would make it a better time to sell than an average year. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't at some point thought about selling WP buffs at some point. Has it ever been at the forefront of my thoughts? No, but like it'd be silly of me to have never thought of that concept before. And I know that, again, let's keep this conditional. If at any point I were to ever do that, like I would probably like set up in advance, right? Like I'd want like the last year to like look pretty good and like maybe minimize some of my like marketing and growth spend to like maybe increase some of the profitability of the business. And like, I don't know, I'm sure there are some things that can be done so that the buyer is like, look at these numbers, like here's the multiplier that, we'll be offering, you get a higher multiplier if you can show and prove that you're at a certain potential profitability level or a certain level of success. And over a past successful 18 months, a lot of companies have had probably a lot of signups, a lot more new revenue coming through, maybe lower churn, maybe, higher MRR growth or ARR growth. So it being a good time to sell has led to more sales happening and more exits happening at maybe like a local maximum, right? For folks who can get the most, the bigger potential buyouts, maybe a bigger one than potentially next year when the past year has been maybe average again. So I think that's an interesting concept that I buy. Also, Iain, what you said about just like, I've done this for the past 10 years, will I be doing it for the next 10 years? It's a really big question for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people like just starting off, they'll say like, why not? Like, of course, you've been successful for 10 years. Why wouldn't you keep doing it for another 10 years? But like, once you've been doing something for 10 years, it almost like becomes not about the like success. Like you almost like forget about growth a little bit. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but like even after 5 years, I'm like, growth will happen. Like kind of whatever. Like I want to be happy. Like what's going to make me happy? Like, do I need a change right now? Like, do I need like, cause sometimes like change is a good thing. Often change is a good thing. And so I think people have been doing something for 10 years are like, I'm ready for the next thing. I've been successful with this thing. Like I want to close that chapter and have the choice to be able to do that myself. So selling is actually like something that doesn't just make sense for me financially. It makes sense for like me actually being able to move to a new chapter as opposed to kind of feeling like you're in this monotonous like success loop of like doing the same thing you've been doing for the last 10 years. So I buy that too.
And I think having, if you're at a certain scale, that's a certain size of your business, and you've got offers coming in, and you're connected to the people offering you lots of money. But if you're not that, and you're, a kind of a medium-sized business where you think, all these other ones are getting sold. How do I quite like that, but actually, before FlipWP, there wasn't. Would you go to Flipper? Would you go to Microacquire? Would you go to like, where would you
Flipper,
kind of advertise it?
Oh my God, yeah, not the place for WordPress businesses.
But you know what though? I've got a love-hate relationship with it because I acquired WP User Manager from Flipper, and
really,
and it was to me that seemed super scary and super strange, but it's turned out really well and it worked at the time. But it didn't go through the auction process. It was almost like a buy it now offer. So and that's how, for me, it's kind of all started, because ever since then I thought, well, I should really keep an eye on Flipper because this opportunity came up. Maybe others will. And should I keep an eye on all of these other sort of places where people sell side projects, or, and it might be a WordPress plugin and Microacquire, which is why I started just tweeting all these opportunities that I would not necessarily be interested in myself, but trying to put them out there and syndicate them to people, because otherwise you've all got to keep looking at all these disparate places. So
right.
Keeping it in one place with FlipWP, even just from that point of view, makes sense.
I like that. I kind of wanted to go back a little bit to that mention of like, Alex was mentioning like product market fit, like slapped you in the face. Like if you can just like go onto Twitter and like just like hashtag WordPress and put out opportunities out there, and like you're getting a lot of likes, you're getting a lot of replies. Like, okay, like you're getting a lot of activity. People are like taking the time to like DM you separately. Maybe they're like moving it into a Slack, right? They're like messaging you like, hey, saw this opportunity. Can we talk about it? Like, you're like, that's something, right? It sounds that like magic something that's like, oh, like I'm not even like doing very much to gain traction, but like somehow we have traction. I don't really know how it happened, but I just tweeted a few things happened. Like that can create a business too. So I did have one question that I kind of was thinking of in terms of just in general, like who the buyers are who have signed up. I'm sure you have some confidentiality of people who signed up, so I don't need specifics about things. But like WP Buffs has an acquisition unit. Like I've signed up to mostly hear about like, you know, there's a few different kind of businesses we like to acquire, but like the biggest one are like care plan businesses or website management subscription businesses. So I'm always on the lookout for those. But I was like, I saw your tweet go out, Iain, and you were announcing it, and I signed up immediately, and I was like, first, like, yes. And like, you're like, nope, sorry, you were third or something like that. And I was like, almost first. But I think that there are, I'm sure, most of the major acquirers in the WordPress space have signed up or will in the future sign up as you continue to gain momentum. I won't name any specifics because people probably, well, hey, let me name some specifics. Like, you know, there's Automotive clearly has big acquisition unit. Neither of you have to confirm or deny any of this, but I'm going to name a few. So there's Syed over there. There's, you know, the stellar WP Liquid Web acquisition unit that's done some major acquisitions. And I guess those are two I'll name. I know. My question is, out of all of the folks who have signed up, I just named 3 WordPress specific, maybe not in general in their company. Liquid Web is like a big company, right? But Automotive's pretty WordPress specific. WBuffs is WordPress specific. Of all the signups, like what percentage of buyers are what you would consider internal to WordPress versus external to WordPress, more in the tech scene, more people who are like, what is this open source thing? I used to think how do you make money just giving away free software? But like, oh, there's money here. I should think about getting into the WordPress space. What's the split there in general?
Vast majority of people are inside WordPress in some capacity.
Yeah, there are some people that have come through, you know, the door, and you look at the email addresses and you think, I don't recognize that, and they might be just generally in tech, or people that are more into, they're sort of from the micro acquire world of small SaaS, and they can see the potential in owning a plugin. But yeah, the vast majority are WordPress people, and it does range from, you know, like you said, the big acquirers, the big companies, the big hosts, to other larger plugin companies. All the way down to people that I would sort of class similar to myself, that are single developer people with maybe one plugin and looking to acquire another. And, you know, so you've got a very broad spectrum of folks, which I think is good, rather than it just being the hosts who have just got all the money and then nobody else interested, and therefore they're only interested in a certain type of product or a certain type of sale. It's very varied.
Yeah, throwing the WPMRR virtual summits, like half of my sponsors are hosts. It's like you clearly know where the money, a lot of the money and financial power is coming from. So, you know, no wonder Liquid Web has now an acquisition unit. You know, no wonder it's putting a bet on the WordPress space, right? In essence of it, but. Okay. I also want to talk a little bit about like FlipWP as a business and how things are going. Obviously, it's like pretty new, but you know, I think when we booked this podcast recording, you mentioned you do annual recurring revenue, so you have an annual subscription for the buyers on the buyer's side, and also a 1%. It sounds like fee at the when a sale is made through FlipWP. I guess once that deal's complete. What is, or I guess my question is like, how is the business going in terms of, I guess, the things you're working on right now? Are you trying to drive more buyers, more deals? Do you have more specific focuses or more general focuses? Are you still in the mode where you're just kind of like, this is cool, like let's just keep getting feedback and improving different stuff? What's the status of things over there?
So, I mean, the strong product market fit has kind of is we're still riding that wave. We're doing nothing to get listings, and we do a maximum of 4 each week. And
those are free to sign up for the seller, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, we've had 4 nearly every week since launch. So we've had great deal flow, and that continues to happen organically. The seller signups are solid. Like we had a big influx at the start. That like naturally has slowed down, and that's to be expected.
Yeah, the buyers, yeah.
Yeah, and now we've just got to get those first big batches of deals done. We've had a handful of people complete sales through the site, which has been great. We'll get success stories out. We'll show people what can happen through the platform, and that will keep things moving nicely.
Yeah, I think we tried our best to sort of do the launch really well in terms of utilizing and leveraging our email lists and the newsletters, which are very much aligned with those kind of folks. And WP Trends had a massive crossover with people that were just basically there for acquisition opportunities. So if you're going to send them some from around the web every month or so, and instead you just point to a single marketplace, it's going to create traction. And from a marketing or from a launch point of view, we tried to hit as much as possible in terms of the other WordPress newsletters and the WordPress news sites like Post Status and the Tavern and stuff. And it went well. And yeah, as Alex said, the buyer sign up was good. There's definitely room for more. And there's definitely people that probably initially thought, am I going to part with $300 until I know what the deal is here? They perhaps didn't know us. They perhaps didn't, a lot of it was based on trust because we signed up buyers before we had listings published, even though we had listings in the pipeline and we knew what we were getting and we knew what we were going to be publishing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that is a trickle coming in now of extra buyers that see what's what, and we kind of slightly tease what's on the site in terms of listings. We don't show, obviously it's all private, but there is some stuff on the homepage that just says, look, these are the types of deals that are out with some blurred out info, but ballpark ranges of asking prices and revenue. So you can see that, if you're looking to buy something for $500, you might not be there. But if you're also looking to spend 5 figures on a business, this is the place to come and look. So yeah, as Alex said, we're riding that wave, and there's more stuff that we need to do to encourage people. And it's great to have deals being done, and we've got testimonials on the site from buyers and sellers. It's great, but we need to just do a bit more, I guess.
Yeah, I think I would be remiss in saying that I feel like you two have been really successful so far. Even though you're saying like, yeah, we have this to improve or that to tweak, like doing a two-sided marketplace is really hard. Like it's way harder in some cases than like just like a B2B business and B2C business. Oof, that's always just a super challenge. But the like Airbnb, you have to get the people renting the houses, then you have to get the people who are renting the houses of the renters, two-sided. One person has a house that they're renting, the other person is renting the house, right? So, and that's hard to get people on both sides. And just the fact that you're already like having deals go through and having signups on both sides of things, like that's a win in itself, is just not only hitting product market fit, but hitting the fit of like hitting forward movement in both those areas. Because in order for your business to be successful, and definitely to be successful at scale, you're going to have have pretty predictable like sign up and activity from both those sides. I like the idea also of, because when you do a two-sided marketplace, it's kind of like, who am I charging? Like, how is this monetized? Like, who's paying for this? And I think it's totally the right, like, usually the best practice is like charge the people who have the super high return on investment for whatever they're buying or whatever they're paying for. So for me, when I saw like whatever, $300 a year or something, like I literally didn't have to think twice about it. Like swipe my credit card and signed up for it because I'm thinking about buying 5-figure businesses. We're actually not quite at the point where we're doing like 6-figure businesses. That's still out of our price range as a business for WP Buff's acquisition unit. But I'm definitely looking at more than like $500. Like I've got some money to spend. So like $300, the only thing I could think of is like, okay, I'm spending $300 to like maybe see one deal that ends up working for me this year. Like acquisition costs, like that's easy decision, right? To spend $300 to like have a good chance of landing one business this year. Like, yeah, where do I sign up, right? Like, what's that, the Futurama meme? It's like, shut up and take my money. Like, sure. So I think that's makes a lot of sense because acquirers, sure, $300 is that's fine for a year of seeing all these listings. I'm interested about the 1% fee at the end of deals. Does that mean part of this, you're obviously like sending out listings to buyers and all that stuff, but are you actually like, would you call yourself like a middle maker / deal maker here in the middle, like helping with like contracts and stuff? Or is it just deals that are done through the platform get that 1% fee? Like, how do you track and like measure that stuff? And like, how involved are you in the actual buying and selling process?
This is the first time that I've done a business and we've like hired a lawyer before we started. So legally there are a couple of parts. Like we are not party to the transaction, but we do take the fee. And there is when you sign up to list, you sign a contract committing to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we don't need to know the details. We just send over an invoice when the deal is complete. And we've got like contract behind that. Pretty straightforward from our end, but we don't want we don't want the liability of being involved in the deal. So we don't touch that. We have ended up helping people a lot with valuations, which has been really interesting. Probably the vast majority of our inquiries have been, oh, hey, I want to list. I'm thinking of these numbers. Like here are 3 metrics. What do you think I can get? And that's been interesting, and that's been the case even at the like hundreds of thousands or millions of dollar asking prices. I've
seen a few of the 7 figures,
right? So
come through,
and it's been like, what do you think? It's been interesting. I'm pretty good at valuing WordPress businesses by sense of smell alone these days.
Mm-hmm.
You just have a 5-second look, and that's your number. That's been interesting. Those numbers are based on what we think, what we see in real time, the market reacting to.
I'd want to dig into that a little bit more, actually, because I feel like there are probably people listening now who run WordPress businesses who maybe they're interested in selling now, or maybe they're not, but why wouldn't you have it at least somewhere on your mind in terms of an exit strategy that has potential? So I think it's important to talk about these things like valuation right now. I know a lot of people who run their businesses not necessarily to sell, but with the idea that they might want to sell in the future. So they want to like prepare to do that now. They want to like get organized. They want to make sure all their stats are there. They want to make sure all their metrics are set up so that if and when that time comes, they can do it easily. And I think that's just akin to running a good business anyway. So why wouldn't you do that? But I feel like I've seen and I've had conversations with people who are like actively selling or want to sell, and a lot just like they just don't even like know what to like they would list at. Like they kind of have an idea of like what would make them happy. Actually, a lot don't. That's probably the most important part is like, what are you gonna like, if I offered you this figure, like would you just move forward? Well, that's an important thing to think about. If it was half that, no way. Part of it is, the buyer and the seller are going to come together and find a price that makes sense for everyone. But are you going to be happy walking away at that price? Are you going to be like happy that went through? It's important to think about now. But like, I know a lot of people don't even have like I don't know, M&A professionals come in or like have financial reports done for their businesses to like tell them what like, maybe not an exact valuation, but like what the range may look like in terms of an acquisition. Sounds like you're helping people a little bit with that as they come through, but are you finding that a lot of people who are selling also just have their stuff in order and just like know what they want to post? Or are people maybe seeing FlipWP, knowing they want to sell and just kind of posting to, I guess, see if they can attract any acquirers and then have more conversations about it without thinking much about what the actual amount might be at the beginning? What does that usually look like for the folks coming to you for selling?
I think the majority have an idea. I think they've been in the people that do have an idea have a reasonable idea. Then nobody's coming in thinking they want a 20 times valuation and think that's realistic. They've been around
annual revenue multiplier.
But this is, I mean, this is, I do want to mention it. The fact that we try and guide people if they don't have an idea, and we try and make sure that we're putting reasonable asking prices on the site, because there are like micro acquire. I don't think they do that. There is there seems to be a SaaS explosion of micro SaaSes at the moment, where people have built something and it's making $200 a month, and they list it for like, 6 figures or something, and people are like, whoa. Okay, I get that you've built this thing. I get that you've put blood, sweat, and tears into this, but we don't necessarily need to pay that. We need to be realistic based on the revenue. So yeah, I think we're trying to keep it to a more realistic level within WordPress, and I think that generally shakes out as a 3 to 5 times valuation. Is that kind of the guide we go down?
And is that on, sorry, just to clarify, like 3 to 5 times, would that be off of like an annual profit marker, or like an annual off of, so 3 to 5 times annual recurring revenue?
Yeah. And we are getting businesses that don't have the recurring aspect. Like there's a lot of people that are still on places like Theme Forest or Code Canyon, and they're doing good revenue, but it's based on single purchases, the lifetime type purchases. So it's a lot harder to command a bigger multiple when you don't have the recurring revenue to back it up. So because buyers aren't going to want to invest in a 5 yearly return or something that basically could drop off tomorrow because new sales tank. So there's movement within in that range, isn't there?
So the 3 to 5 multiplier on ARR has a bunch of assumptions baked into it, which are generally true for your average WordPress product business. If you don't, those assumptions include like assumptions on margins, on straight up profitability, on renewal rates, etc. If you are abnormal in any way, and that goes both ways, then that number changes. So if you say don't have recurring revenue, then that number comes down. That 20 times valuation does exist somewhere. We talked to a lot of people doing M&A before and during launch. One of the really interesting conversations I had was with, I guess it was a banker, was his job. And he really objected to any like filtering on the valuations, because he felt that was his decision to make. And I was, at the same time, we had feedback like that say the micro acquire valuations were through the roof, and people didn't like that. So that was me trying to explain, sure, like I for your average business, we want to keep it what we consider like reasonable, but there's some leeway in that. But yeah, that 20 times valuation does exist where you solve the strategic need that can, do whatever. So it works both ways. In general, 3 to 5 ARR. Having your details in order, like you were talking about, Joe, doesn't seem to actually be a big mover on the valuation. The product and potential seems to be impacting it more. And when I say have your details in order, I mean like I don't mean having like separate bank accounts, etc. is a requirement regardless. I mean, in terms of profitability, specific growth rate, that kind of comes into the conversation. We're not seeing that weighted as much as you would think, which I think is just indicative of a hot market right now.
Yeah. Interesting. I think I could see that being true even not in as hot of a market, because I think that having your stuff in order obviously is very important, but all of that gets taken care of in due diligence anyway. Like all acquisitions go through some form of due diligence, right? Like you have to like actually give access to like some accounts so that someone can look in and make sure you're telling the truth about your numbers, or just to make sure that things are either what you said they are as a seller or just what you expect them to be as the buyer in terms of offering, making a certain investment in this. But initial conversations don't usually happen around that. Usually initial conversations, maybe there's some basic financials, right? Like, I want to know what your monthly recurring revenue is, or like, maybe like a general profit margin. Like, what am I looking at acquiring? Like, especially if you're looking to acquire a business, like for the profit of it, like WP Buffs, like we acquired WP Easy late last year, early this year. And a big piece of that was acquiring a business that was already profitable and kind of like plugging that profitability into WP Buffs. So like, bumped our profit margin every month, which is great. But that was also the kind of acquisition it was, right? There are kind of like different kinds of acquisitions, right? Maybe some people are looking for profit. Some people are just looking for a home run, like a big investment on something with potential that maybe doesn't have the stats yet, but they want to hit a home run on it. Some people, maybe it's like an acqui-hire. They have that team that like, is doing great work, and they want that team to work for them as well. I'm sure a lot are mixes of all three of those, but
and there's people taking out competitors, people buying similar businesses within their sphere just to kind of consolidate. It is a mixed bag of reasons.
What you said is like kind of what WP Buffs acquisition unit does, but it's like not our goal. Like, yes, technically we've acquired a competitor like WP Easy. Like, yes, technically they were like a competitor of ours, but like that wasn't even our real thought process. But I guess it's also like kind of true. Like, I guess I do have to face that fact a little bit. Like that's not untrue of our acquisition unit in terms of acquiring other care plan businesses. But I guess we try to think about it a little differently in terms of like WPZ was not going to be run anymore a year from when we acquired it. So like there were 150 customers who would have lost management of their website. And like we wanted to come in and help with that because we have the infrastructure too, and it makes sense. And we can, invest in that
serving
for the
more
owner
customers.
Of that business. Yeah, I mean, it's good. It was good for everybody. Everybody won from that acquisition. So I think that's like how we like to think about it. But I mean, in the world we live in, like acquiring competitors is also a thing. Probably some companies do it somewhat more strategically. Like I'm sure like the big tech companies, like they're probably really fucking strategic about like, oh, that company is growing too fast. Like, let's just acquire them. Because they kind of can. And it's, hey, there's some monopoly issues and all sorts of issues with that, but they're kind of too big to fail at this point. So like, who's really going to stop them at scale, So anyway, I think that's something to think about too.
Your point about due diligence is again linked to the role we are trying to play, which is very limited because, we're providing some initial numbers to start conversations, but people need to do their own due diligence. We're not vouching for these numbers. We're not, we could go down the road of hardening the platform to show verified numbers from Stripe or verified numbers from PayPal or whatever, which is, I know Flipper does that and it does that well. It does it with Google Analytics and stuff like that. But again, if you're serious in buying, you're going to do your own due diligence. We're connecting people and then letting them go and do the process they would go through if someone knocked on their door and said, will you buy my plugin?
Right. Yeah. FlipWP is like, it's more of the handshake piece than it is it's like a souped up handshake as opposed to literally walking you from A to Z in the acquisition, which I actually like that model a lot because I feel like you could have gone, you two could have gone in two directions. One is the direction you've gone in, which is 1% finder's fee, handshake, sign a contract, easy. There's also like, okay, we take like 3% or we take 5%, or whatever that percentage is, a higher percentage for actually taking on a little bit more legal responsibility, probably actually having to put a lot more time and energy into each one of these deals, probably tens, if not hundreds of hours as the person going through these. Maybe for some of these 7-figure deals, it's a lot of time, but you get a bigger payoff in the end. And I think a lot of people, and maybe at some point you'll grow into that second model, right? Who knows? Like maybe that's the next step of the business, right? There, of course, you could do that, but I really like that you guys actually chose to go the more minimalist, easier route for a less of a percentage, because you can have higher priorities in terms of running a business like this, like not spending all your time on it. Like you can still grow the business and do a good job making introductions and do all sorts of good networking with folks, and just like do it in like a more fun, less pressure filled way. And I think a lot of people are going to be initially drawn towards like, what's the biggest revenue driver? How are we going to make the most money with this? Which, has its importance too. I'm not saying financials aren't important for a business, and profitability isn't important, and driving revenue isn't important, but equally as important to make sure you're like, one, enjoying running the business, and two, taking like steps into it. And this seems like a very good step into like, if you want to do more, you can always choose to do that, but you've chosen this initial model that is, it's just going to be maybe drive a little less revenue, but it's going to be way easier and less probably, from a legal standpoint, like less onus on
less
you.
Hairy.
I mean, in terms of my enjoyment of the business, let's be clear, a 5% fee makes me enjoy it a lot more. We have no plans to change the success fee, just to be clear. But I don't actually see. We could keep our current model and charge significantly more if we could show we can get you a significantly higher price. So the value can be there regardless of how much work we're doing. And maybe we do no work but provide the value. And if we're providing sufficient value, I will happily charge however much I think we can get away with. Which right now is 1%, and to be clear, not changing it, but
I got it. I honestly, as a buyer who's gonna stay signed up, like if my fee next year gets doubled as a buyer, but you're able to show me like I'm able to get a better, have more success in my acquisitions based on what you're doing, I have honestly no problem with that. So I think that I like the idea of like wherever you're starting off pricing wise, like it's wrong. Like it's always wrong. Like no one's ever like, what is perfect pricing? It doesn't even, it's like, that's an oxymoron almost. So I think that getting the feedback and working with these deals and creating case studies and really like getting to not only people's like most obvious pain points, but like the like subtle pain points that like buyers have that like other people may not know because they haven't worked with hundreds of buyers before, and pushing that to the forefront allows you to potentially increase pricing without ever like being more legally responsible or doing more in the deals. If you can just, it's like it's more proof that what you're already offering is solid. So if people have a higher chance of being successful either as a seller or a buyer, and maybe sellers are getting higher valuations based on your model, or buyers are, maybe they're paying more, but they don't like really care because like if they're doing $100,000 deal, like who's going to do a $100,000 deal and then say like, it was 105,000, like I'm not doing it. Like, okay, maybe someone, but like if it was me, like whatever, like let's get it done, in my opinion. So
you've just had the price of your next acquisition go up 5%, Joe.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I'm just helping you guys out. Hey,
I think
all good.
so. I think there are many. The amount of revenue we've done is completely dwarfed by the amount of value we've created already. Just from the purchase prices. I think it is true that we can help people. We can make both sides happy. We can get the buyers better access, and we can get the sellers better prices, and that is good for at both ends. And yeah, I mean, there's as we get more success through the platform, for sure, that opens up opportunities. Something that is interesting, that is very underutilized right now in WordPress, is like early investing, like angel investing. That is not a thing that really is done right now. But I mean, you get isolated examples of that happening. But if you want to raise some money and you want to do it within WordPress right now, you call like 4 or 5 people. That's a big opportunity. That's something we can definitely look at in the future. People who want to raise money without exiting, also going to be interesting. And then whatever happens when we do get more serious interest from outside of WordPress in like, how do we approach this? Who do we talk to? The answer is call Iain.
Call Iain and Alex, yeah.
I think that's an interesting model to go into as well. I mean, I know, like, I forget what it's called. It's run by Rob Walling, and he does MicroConf, but it's
Tiny Seed.
Tiny Seed. I was going to say Micro Seed. I almost had it. So yeah, Tiny Seed. And there are some, I don't know if I'd call them WordPress companies, but companies that kind of are WordPress adjacent or that have WordPress plugins as part of what they're doing, like Castos, like they have a WordPress plugin, right? So it's adjacent and kind of paralleled into the WordPress space in terms of marketing opportunities and target markets and stuff like that. But I mean, I don't know a ton of like angel investors who are actively working on stuff like that. There are a few. There are a couple, one of which I've already named here on this podcast. But I think that the acquisition / in just investing in WordPress companies, whether that's buying, whether that's investing for the future, whether kind of what you've said already, Alex, maybe there's bigger things like really big investments that have like future IPO implications into them, right? WP Engine, people who've invested in that 5 years ago are going to be happy at some point, probably in the next 5 years. So anyway, guys, thanks for jumping on. This has been a ton of fun. We're going for the hour-long episode, which doesn't usually happen. And every time it does happen, it's because we were having good conversations. So I had an extra long and super valuable episode today, all about flipping WordPress products, sites, service companies, and maybe not just flipping, selling something you've been doing for a long time, and it's time to put in somebody else's hands. So why don't we finish off and just let folks know where they can check out FlipWP, obviously, where they can find you too on social media, all that jazz.
Yeah, so it's flipwp.co at the moment, and it's soon to be .com. We just launched a little bit early, but we like rushing things. And I am PovWeb on Twitter and around the place. And yeah, if you're interested in WordPress monthly kind of business insights and market trends, then wptrends.co is the place to go and sign up for that.
Sweet. Yeah. I'm Alex Denning on Twitter. Get ellipsis.com is the Ellipsis site. Yeah.
Cool. I'm on FlipWP.co right now, and I was kind of an early adopter into here. Like, I was in pretty early. I was checking it out. Iain, I gave you like a little bit of feedback on some things where I was like, oh, this would be cool, or that would be cool. And then you messaged me back like an hour later, like, oh, hey, I did that thing. So you got listings in here. You can order them by everything, by type, model, ARR, TTM, installs, price, when it was added. I mean, so you can see a whole list of everything that's for sale right now. And I'm seeing like, I don't know, there are like 20 or so here, 25.
Yeah, 17 currently.
17. Yeah. Okay, so 17 things for sale right now. So if you're a buyer, definitely time to check it out. And if you're potentially thinking about selling now, go to FlipWP. It's free to list, and you can talk to Iain and Alex about potentially proper number to throw up there for valuation, and then go ahead and post. And if you're thinking about it for the future, it's just good to keep FlipWP in mind, because you never know when you may want to make a big decision about your business. Could be next week, could be 10 years from now, but have FlipWP in mind for that. So thanks, guys. Last thing, Iain, I'm going to ask you, since you haven't been on the podcast before, if you wouldn't mind asking our listeners for a little Apple Podcast review. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. If you enjoyed this episode, and if you enjoy listening to Joe on the WPMRR podcast, then drop him a lovely review and let him know how good the episode was, or any of the episodes in the past. He would really appreciate it.
Yes, excellent. Thank you, sir. WPMRR.com/review gets you redirected right to the Apple Podcast page if you are on an Apple device or a Mac. If you are a new listener to the show, we've got 150 plus older episodes. You can go, feel free to binge some of any of that content. We've got episodes and all sorts of stuff. So if you go to WPMRR.com/podcast, we have a search bar right there. You can go and, look up your keyword, find an episode, and get some learning done about your topic of choice. WPMRR community, built on Circle. As of this point, we got like 150 or so people in there. I think a little bit more than that. We're like on our way to 200. So things are growing slowly and steadily. And Iain and Alex are going to be doing an AMA that they will probably have posted as you're listening to this episode. So if you go into the AMA space in the community, you can ask them any questions you have about FlipWP, about buying, about selling, about the state of the WordPress ecosystem. I know I'm going to be in there. I'm going to have 10 follow-up questions I'm going to think of after this episode. So I'm going to be in there asking them as well. So check that out for AMA. The WPMRR Virtual Summit coming up September 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Signing up for the WPMRR community automatically registers you for the summit. So all you have to do is sign up and you're automatically added to the summit space. If you're serious about growing your monthly recurring revenue and you want to not only grow it, but you want to do it responsibly in a way that's going to allow you to spend time with friends and family, have fun while you're doing it, enjoy the journey. That's the virtual summit for you. So we'd love to have you. Cool. That is it for this week on the podcast. We will be in your earbuds again and on YouTube next Tuesday. Iain, Alex, thanks again for being on, guys. It's been real.
Thanks, James.
Hey, see you, everybody.